Hello, and welcome back to the next episode of this Healthy Life podcast. I'm very excited for my guest today, Justine Stenger, and she is here to share her wealth of knowledge. She is a mitochondrial health and cellular health expert, and she knows so much information about all the cells in our body that she's going to be able to share with us today. And she's got an amazing background with holistic nutrition, functional medicine training, and she's also Bredesen trained to specialize in cell membrane medicine. So welcome, Justine. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm very excited because we haven't had anyone on that podcast talk about any of the topics that we're going to go over today. And I think it's such an important part of just overall health, healthy aging, but also if you're dealing with chronic illness as well, this is something that absolutely needs to be addressed and is often overlooked. So very excited for you to share your knowledge. And I'd love to start with an intro. You can share a little bit about yourself and how you got into this field of, work and, being so interested in our cell membranes.
Oh, well, yeah, thank you. I have a pretty long story, so I won't bore everyone with all the details. I really got into this field because I was connected with Dr. Bruce Hoffman from the Hoffman Center for Integrative Medicine in 2012. And he was implementing cell membrane medicine into his practice. So I had the great honor and privilege of getting to see all of these patients' test results completely transform, their health completely transform when they started implementing phospholipids and essential fatty acids. And Dr. Hoffman's work he works through 7 levels and layers. So he's really leaving no stone left unturned. And I just became really fascinated in understanding phospholipids and fatty acids and the role that they play in supporting the structure and the function of our cell membranes and restoring mitochondrial function. And of course, there's many inputs that go into that whole picture. So I then pursued my education in membrane medicine and studied with a lipid researcher for about 6 years. And she really mentored me. I mean, I felt like I got a PhD in phospholipid fatty acids from her. And the more and more that I've learned about the importance of the cell membrane and the mitochondria, specifically now the mitochondria, and using lipids and fatty acids to really help to restore mitochondrial health, the more hungry I am to learn and to help practitioners and patients to really understand that their bodies are made of 70 trillion cells. We have 200 different cell types. We have 500 trillion or more mitochondria. And the amazing thing about the human body is that we have these biological membranes on every single cell, on every single membrane inside the cell. And so the body is all about compartmentalization. It compartmentalizes from cell to cell with these biological membranes. And then we have that same level of compartmentalization inside the cell as well with these biological membranes. And if an organelle doesn't have a membrane, it's actually interacting with one. So the membranes are so, so important. And because of the environment that we live in today, we're constantly being assaulted with these things that damage the cell membrane, whether it's from electromagnetic frequencies, blue light that everybody is sitting under and directly looking at all day long, environmental toxins, depletions in nutrition because our food system is so depleted. The list really goes on, and I call all of those things, all of the life's downloads that download on us and end up ultimately damaging our cells and our mitochondria. And so if we can provide our body with things like exogenous phospholipids and fatty acids, which are really essential nutrients and conditionally essential nutrients, we get the opportunity to build reserve capacity. We get the opportunity to build our biochemical bank account so that our body actually has what it needs to go in and restore damaged aspects of the cell membrane, damaged aspects of the mitochondrial membrane, and restore those damaged parts with healthy, fresh, functional phospholipids.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then so when someone kind of embarks on a journey of wanting to work on their cell membrane, what's kind of a starting point? Like, do you do any tests and assessments to see what's going on with their mitochondria and what's going on with their cell membranes? Or do you just assume living in the world that we live in, everyone has some sort of damage and it's kind of, you need to start kind of with these basic steps to start building that up and then kind of progress from there?
So I'm personally not doing any testing. My practice is all about education and really understanding. It's actually called the cellular cure. And so it's education around how we can restore the health cycle, how we can restore mitochondrial function. Ultimately, what are all the inputs that are required to not only restore health on a cellular level, but also just maintain health on a cellular level as well. So you can get a lot of insight just through symptom questionnaires, taking a history. And at this stage in my career, I really feel that that is the most important thing to do, because I think we can get really distracted and fixated on all these labs and specific markers. And ultimately, when we look at restoration, all of those inputs are going to be the same, right? We can tailor specifics to the individual, and the inputs are still the same for every single mammal. Every single individual still needs the same inputs in order to restore health and maintain health. And so for me personally in my practice, I'm not doing a lot of testing. I've moved away from that a lot. And I also work with some physicians that are testing. So I love when I have an opportunity to look at a red blood cell fatty acid test and to be able to help guide somebody specifically around supporting essential fatty acids and balancing them out so that we can optimize fluidity in the membrane and optimize immune function. And, we're supporting, like I mentioned earlier, we have 200 different cell types. And all of those different cell types are going to have a little bit of a different fatty acid profile and a little bit of a different phospholipid composition depending on the cell type. And so I get really excited when I look at a red blood cell fatty acid test and can help optimize individuals with their fatty acids to ultimately support cellular health. So there are tests that we can use to assess the degree of mitochondrial dysfunction, the degree of depletion, especially with these essential nutrients. And I really aim to emphasize that, Erica, because a lot of people, we live in this day and age where people are getting recommendations for supplements left, right, and center.
Yep. Yeah. Before you know it, you have 30 things that you're taking like 3 times a day, and you're like, how am I even supposed to take all this and eat and, do all the, go on with your life? It's just so overwhelming. Like some of these practitioners, like how many supplements they want you on.
Yeah. And there absolutely is a time and a place for helping to kind of restore biochemistry, but that's really just one level and one layer. And when we think about, the food conversation could be a very long one, because when we look at eating locally and seasonally and really leaning into these nutrient dense foods that, nature provides for us, I personally believe that when we're strategic about what we're eating and we are eating according to the season that we're in and the latitude that we live at, that we can really optimize nutrition through whole food. And then, I was just telling my partner this morning that I have noticed, I rarely notice any benefits when I take any supplements at all, outside of, my body craves the body biophospholipid complex. Like that, like my body is just saying, yes, like more of this. And thing is evening primrose oil,
Yeah.
I feel really nourished when I'm consuming those things. But when it comes to supplements, I'm not that person that really notices anything. Supplements aside from, I have noticed that when I take B1, that thiamine, I feel like I have a little bit more sustained energy throughout the course of the day. So I don't want to say that there isn't a time and a place for supplements, but I do think that we have got to a place in functional and integrative medicine where we're leaning too heavily into utilizing supplements and forgetting that we are a mammal, and farther and farther that we disconnect from nature, the farther we move away from the natural world, the sicker that we become. And that's been really obvious. Hopefully people can open their eyes and see that that's the reality today. So a lot of the education that I provide is just really around helping people to understand that we want to move back to nature. We want to connect with the natural world and do that to our very best ability. And it's challenging living in the world that we live in today because it's so upside down. And my goal is to get people off of all of the supplements and all the things and away from that perception that they need a pill or a potion or a powder or a therapy, all of these like ozone and hyperbaric oxygen and all these gadgets that we can use to optimize health, that not that there's not a time and a place for those for certain individuals. And we do not want to be jumping to those things without first implementing all of the foundational things first.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. It's like if your cells aren't working properly, all these other treatments that you're doing are just not, you're not going to get the most out of it
Mhm.
because at a cellular level, you're just not healthy, right?
Yeah, and I just was speaking about this. So I do a lot of education around Dr. Robert Navio's work, the cell danger response, and what we need to restore the health cycle. And it's really interesting because when you study his work, he actually says that it's counterproductive. So all these people that are in CDR1, that it's counterproductive to be giving anything to these individuals, pushing detoxification, to be doing the parasite cleanse, to be pushing binding, pulling. Not only are you further depleting an already depleted person, and you also are throwing all of those things on a cell that's metabolically inactive.
Mm-hmm.
So completely
Just
counterproductive.
overwhelms you. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up. So that was actually going to be one of my questions. So I've been hearing a lot about cell danger response, and I don't think a lot of people are familiar with exactly what that means. Can you break that down for us and explain exactly what that concept is?
Yeah. So this is Dr. Robert Navio's work, and it is really about a cycle that the mitochondria enter. So our mitochondria are our sixth sense. So they're always surveying the environment for threats. And this has been really fascinating to learn and understand for me, and for me to be able to educate the people that I work with around this, because it is so imperative to, first and foremost, to get an individual in an environment where their mitochondria perceive as safe. And of course, this is, we have to do a lot of work now to ensure that, because that's going to be like the lights that I talked to you about earlier. All electromagnetic frequencies they're such massive assaults to our mitochondria. And of course, there's all the environmental toxins and all of these other things, psychological stress, trauma, all of these things are going to be potential indicators to the mitochondria that they would enter that cell danger response, or threats. And so when the mitochondria enter the cell danger response, they become metabolically inactive. They stiffen their membranes. They lessen communication with other cells because they want to contain that threat. And so this is ultimately an evolutionarily conserved response to protect the host from harm. So the body is always doing its very best to protect us, right? All of these things are in our best interest, even though it doesn't always feel like that when we're in the thick of experiencing some of these really debilitating symptoms. And so they enter this CDR1, and there's three phases of the cell danger response. There's CDR1, there's CDR2, and there's CDR3. And of course, I'm simplifying this a lot. So if anybody's interested in learning more, you'll want to go dive into his paper. Now, if all things progress as they should, we want CDR1 to move to CDR2. Then CDR2 goes to CDR3. And once we're at CDR3, now we start to have mitochondrial biogenesis. We have old cells teaching new cells how to function properly. And we basically are restoring that health cycle. And that's the natural, normal, healthy process. But what happens is some people will end up getting stuck. So the health cycle doesn't move forward. So you're stuck in CDR1. Some people can progress to CDR2 and then get stuck there. Also progress to CDR3 and get stuck there. And there's different diseases and conditions that are associated with CDR1, CDR2, and CDR3. And so I often use the example of mast cell activation syndrome. That's a really great example of a condition that would be CDR1.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask, like, is CDR1 more like kind of like autoimmune flaring and like inflammation, or kind of break down what sorts of conditions people can experience in each one?
Yeah, CDR1 is when if a patient is really highly reactive, they are, in that kind of fear-based
Yeah.
space, enlarged amygdala, like nervous system dysregulation, no emotional regulation whatsoever. They're reacting to foods, they're reacting to supplements. They just are unable to really tolerate anything. And this is where, like I said before, it's really counterproductive to be giving anybody that's in that stage, a parasite cleanse or mold detox, really any supplements outside of the lipids that I talk about, because the lipids are inputs that are going to help to restore that health cycle. And Dr. Robert Navio actually talks about the therapeutic potential of using exogenous phospholipids and fatty acids to restore the health cycle. And there's a whole field of research too around this with, it's called lipidomics. So we can use exogenous phospholipids to help support improving redox potential. Uh, and again, there's lots of other inputs that we need, but the lipids are a really powerful tool. And so that would be the reason why I like to use mast cell activation syndrome as an example of CDR1, is because a lot of people can relate to that. We have kind of an explosion of mast cells.
It's so common right now. I feel like every other person I talk to or that's struggling with their health is experiencing some level of, mast cell activation or hypersensitivity to things and just reacting to things like they didn't used to. So yeah, I think it's more common than people even know, right? There's a lot of people dealing with these symptoms every day and have no idea that they're dealing with mast cells as well.
Erica, I often say that mast cell activation syndrome is like the classic, like indoor civilized disease.
Kind of is, right?
Yeah, it's like such a testimony to, how far we've moved away from the way that we should be living. And so once we provide the body with those inputs to help to restore the mitochondria, when we get that patient in an environment that is conducive for healing. And this is something else that I always preach and really encourage people to understand, that the defect is not in them. There's nothing wrong with you. The defect is in the environment. And if we are in the same environment that made us sick, we are not going to be able to get well.
Absolutely.
We have to go to a different environment. And that doesn't always mean moving to a different environment. It often just means really cleaning up the environment that you're in. And so part of this process, when I'm working with individuals, it's really about getting a building biologist in to assess your home, making sure that your electromagnetic fields are in a very safe range, making sure that your bedroom is like, a sleep sanctuary, making sure that people are doing all of the quantum, medicine things that we need to be doing, syncing their eyes with the sun first thing in the morning, spending as much time outside as possible, avoiding, protecting your eyes from blue light during the day, getting new lighting in the home, making sure that we are not getting exposed to any form of artificial light after the sun sets, making sure the bedroom is pitch black. Like all of these little things that we forget are so important, that we are regulated by a 24-hour clock. And our body doesn't know what time it is. The only way that your body knows what time it is for you to sync your naked eyes with the sun. And so light in the morning, light throughout the day, that bright light, lots of lux that's helping to support neurotransmitter production and hormone production, regulating our circadian clock, which is regulating everything that's happening.
So many processes in your body, right? Yeah, it basically regulates everything.
Yeah. And then making sure that we have complete and total darkness at night, which is often not talked about, and it is equally as important as light in the morning.
I feel like it makes such a difference. Like for me too, I've noticed light especially affects my sleep. And if I'm not in a totally dark room or wearing like an eye mask, it really, really messes with me. Or when you travel and you stay at a hotel and there's all these little bright lights everywhere, the curtains don't quite close right, you really notice it. And then when you're traveling and kind of moving time zones and stuff too, that's already kind of throwing off your circadian rhythm. So having control at least over the darkness, even if it's just wearing a big eye mask, makes such a huge difference. And I've tracked with my Oura ring too. I'm like, when I use my mask, I sleep better. My sleep score is better because I'm in that blacked out state. And I've tried to be really conscious about trying to get sunlight in my eyes as soon as I wake up. And thankfully our house has like a ton of windows, so we get a lot of light during the day. I think I need to be better about my blue light control, especially later in the day. Like sometimes I wear the blue blockers, sometimes I don't, but I think that's something I'm still working on, trying to be better about, to, really be conscious of that circadian rhythm.
That's actually, Erica, one of the things that I say is a non-negotiable now in terms of an investment. I mean, everyone needs to get light blocking glasses because the artificial light, the light pollution is so immense. And even when we live, I don't even live in the city, I'm out of the city, and you still find, like, whether it's the alarm system on the wall or a little blue or green light that's coming off of an outlet, it's just, we're inundated with artificial light. And we can do our best to make sure that we're creating that pitch black environment at night. And I really also believe that between the sun setting and when you go to bed, it's just imperative to have eye protection on now. Uh, yeah, it's just a result of living in this world where we've created a very, very toxic environment.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about some of the fatty acids. You said that's kind of one of the best ways that we can start to heal ourselves, heal our mitochondria. So just to kind of break it down for people listening out there, what exactly are fatty acids and what are the best forms to take to start doing this repair on your cells?
Yeah, so when I say fatty acids, I mean I think the easiest way to just translate that to a layperson is like fats and oils. So we want to make sure that we're supporting our body with the right fats and oils. And when we are considering lipid replacement therapy, so using exogenous lipids and phospholipids and fatty acids to restore cellular health, we want to really put a lot of emphasis on the essential fatty acids. So we have two essential fatty acids, linoleic acid or omega 6, and alpha linolenic acid or the plant based form of omega 3. And those two fatty acids are non negotiable, they're essential. Our body is unable to synthesize them. So, if we're not getting adequate amounts, if we're not getting optimal ratios of those two essential fatty acids, the result of an essential nutrient deficiency is disease and death. And so, I really want to highlight that for individuals, especially because we live in this world where linoleic acid specifically gets demonized so much. And I understand why, because of what we've done to this polyunsaturated fatty acid through processing. We've turned it into a poison.
Yeah.
So, of course, I'm not referring to consuming any form of industrial seed oil. So, I'm talking about corn, cottonseed, canola, soy, sunflower, safflower, rice bran oil, avocado oil, which a lot of people think is a healthy oil. It is processed with hexane, just like a lot of the other industrial seed oils, grapeseed oil, etc. These are because of the processing with hexane and solvents and bleaches and deodorizers and heating them to temperatures that they can't withstand, we end up turning this potentially really therapeutic form of omega 6 fatty acids. These oils are rich in omega 6 into poison. And our body is either going to take fatty acids and burn them, beta oxidize them to generate ATP, or we are going to take those and we're going to integrate them into the cell membrane. So it's really going to be dependent on what the person needs. If there's lots of damage to the membrane, when you consume these essential fatty acids, your body is going to take them and integrate them into the cell membrane. And that's going to happen through the process of digestion. We consume them in a triglyceride form. We break them down into a monoaceglycerol and a free fatty acid. And then in the free fatty acid form, when we're fasted, those are going to get pulled into the phospholipid pool and become part of your cell membranes or part of who you are. And so this is where it's really important that individuals understand why we want to avoid any form of industrial seed oil, any toxic oil, even overheating like butter and it's smoking, turning a really valuable, these therapeutic fats into, poison. There's a very fine line, medicine and poison, damaging them. So when we look at cellular medicine or cell membrane medicine, we want to focus on the essential fatty acids, but we do have 4 main fatty acids that are found in the cell membrane. So linoleic acid, omega 6 is our most abundant. Arachidonic acid, which is a downstream metabolite on the omega 6 side, often gets demonized as well. It's called inflammatory. It is not just inflammatory. It's inflammatory when it is out of balance. It is an incredibly essential fatty acid. So we want to make sure that we have optimal levels of that. DHA, and DHA is most abundant in the eye, in the brain, which eye is part of the brain, and then oleic acid, which is an omega 9 fatty acid. So those are our 4 most abundant. We have other fatty acids in the membrane as well, but those are found in the highest concentrations. So we want to make sure that we're supporting fatty acid status, and then we want to use these exogenous phospholipids. And the Body Bio PC, Erica, is
I love that stuff.
Yeah, it's truly. I've called it liquid gold for over a decade, and I still haven't drifted from that because it really, truly is. That is the number one thing that I would recommend everyone take. Just make sure that you're actually giving your body those exact materials that it needs to go in and You discard those damaged aspects of the membrane, replace them with these healthy, fresh phospholipids. So that's a beautiful, beautiful
So I'd
combination
love
of.
to I'd love to talk a little bit about that. So when you do start taking, say, some of these fatty acids and phospholipids, do people need to build up slowly, or is it something that your body probably is deficient in and needs right away, so you can kind of ramp up the dosage quickly? And is it something that you take every day forever, or do you pulse it and take breaks so you're not kind of, letting your body rely on these exogenous versions of the fatty acids as well?
So, yeah, so for your first question, it's really going to depend, Erica, on the individual. So, not everybody needs to increase slowly. Individuals that I just mentioned that have mast cell activation syndrome are in that CDR1, really highly reactive. Of course, you want to really start low and slow.
Slow,
Those
yeah.
cells are, reacting to everything. So
Yeah.
even something that is incredibly therapeutic for the body, your body may perceive as a threat. And so in those individuals, I would say you want to start really low and slow, start one at a time so that you're not starting, two things where you're unable to differentiate between, what one caused the reaction. And some people can take a really high dose right out of the gate. I mean, I took 3 tablespoons of the body bio
And
and I was fine. So
what can you expect to feel when you start getting to the right therapeutic dose of body bio oil?
I wouldn't say that I necessarily say you're going to feel anything. Like these are fats, really, right? Essential and conditionally essential nutrients. And I mean, I always say that I would even classify the phospholipid complex today as an essential nutrient just because the demand is so much greater today, just because of all of the environmental assaults that we have on our amazing cells. So that's kind of your first question. In terms of usage and whether or not you'd want to pulse these essential fatty acids and phospholipids, they're again essential nutrients.
So it's
So
something you should just always be giving your body, essentially.
your body
Yeah.
is never going to run out of the need for these nutrients. And Erica, as we age, we actually need more because
Mm.
we have more heteroplasmy. And so more mutations in the mitochondrial DNA. We have higher levels of oxidative stress. We have higher levels of inflammation, more catabolic reactions. We have a decreased ability to synthesize phospholipids. Specifically for women, there's an enzyme that takes phosphatidylethanolamine and converts it to phosphatidylcholine, and that enzyme is largely estrogen dependent. So as our hormones change as we age, that can really impact our ability to synthesize phosphatidylcholine as well, which is our main phospholipid in the body. Phosphatidylcholine is the most abundant phospholipid in the body. So I will definitely be taking the body biophospholipid complex and supporting my body with essential fatty acids for the long haul. And like I said, earlier, I think a lot of people will ask questions about the investment into these products because they will perceive them to be expensive. And when you understand the value of supporting the membrane with phospholipids and fatty acids and providing your body with all these inputs that it needs to do the work that your cells were intended to do. I mean, your body is an amazing healing machine. It does not need a basket full of supplements to know how to work properly. And so I always tell people that when you really start to nourish your membranes with these phospholipids and fatty acids, you have a better ability to get nutrients into the cell. You have a better ability to escort waste out of the cell. And so you don't need as many supplements. You can really, at that point, use hopefully just really whole food, good nutrition. And obviously you do need to be strategic with your food choices. I was just talking to a client earlier today about the importance of like eating oysters for your mineral complex and making sure that you're getting in beef liver for your multivitamin. So we do have access to nature's multivitamins and multiminerals. It's just not everybody is willing to consume
To
those
eat
foods.
those things, yeah. And that's a good point. I actually wanted to ask about that too. Is there a particular diet that can be really supportive for our cellular health and our mitochondria? Like I know we touched on avoiding seed oils and trying to get in some of these more nutrient dense foods, but overall, are there certain kind of like diet trends or specific diets to follow that can be more supportive of our cells and mitochondria?
So I'm a big proponent of eating local and seasonal. I don't subscribe to a dogmatic dietary protocol. When it comes to cell membrane medicine, it is really important. I mean, the local seasonal approach is a beautiful approach to supporting your cells. We do want to be cognizant of blood sugar levels. We want to make sure our blood sugar is balanced because high levels of blood sugar can actually activate an enzyme called phospholipase A2. And that can actively damage the cell membrane. So that acts as lipid scissors that'll clip the fatty acid tails off of the cell membrane. So we want to make sure that we have really, really good blood sugar stabilization. We want to make sure that we're optimizing leptin. We want to make sure that we're getting in all of these nourishing fats and oils to support cellular health. We want to make sure we're getting in optimal amounts of protein. So I tend to lean more towards, focusing on seasonal local vegetables, small amounts of fruit when they're in season, and then really building your plate around these bioavailable, nutrient dense animal foods, providing our cells with so much nourishment.
Yeah, absolutely. And then speaking of nourishment, so I saw recently on your Instagram you were talking about creatine, and you said if there was one supplement, of course, other than body bio oils and things like that, if there was one supplement that you wanted to take every day, it would be creatine. And I think that, my knowledge of it is very small as well, so I'd love to hear your take on it. But a lot of times we think creatine is like, oh, for bodybuilders or people that want to like bulk up at the gym and things like that. But I'm starting to hear more and more about it and getting intrigued about wanting to add that into my kind of regimen as well. So let's talk about creatine. Like, what is it? What does it do for us? And why should all of us be taking this?
Yeah, creatine. I mean, creatine, Erica, is an amazing nutrient for your brain, amazing nutrient for your mitochondria. And yeah, it has been really promoted as a supplement for bodybuilders because it's so good for us to build and maintain muscle mass. We're feeding that skeletal muscle tissue. And it is also good for everyone. And again, speaking of as we age, I mean, this is a crazy important brain nutrient and so important as we age. And there's a ton of research around using creatine to support memory and recall and overall cognition. So it's an antioxidant. It's just an incredible mitochondrial support. So I'm a huge fan of creatine, and yeah, I would put that right in the basket with the Body Bio PC and the Balance Oil.
Okay.
And
And is this something that you integrate into your daily routine? Do you put it into a smoothie, or what's kind of like the best way to get creatine into your body?
yeah, I always add. I don't do smoothies.
Yeah, I'm not a big smoothie person either. That's why it's hard for me to do a lot of these like, shakes and things like that because I'm just not into it.
I'm not a smoothie person. I'm really, really. I mean, I live and breathe what I teach, and I really do make sure that I'm eating, whole real food. 99% of the time. I think the only exception to that rule is if I'm traveling and I a bag of kale chips. That's my my
Your
treat.
vice.
Kale chips. So I will typically just take 5 grams and put it in a little bit of filtered, structured water. I'll usually add it to. I mean, I'll take a little bit of magnesium biglycinate before bed as well. I usually just add it in to my little drink with my
Okay.
magnesium. It's
And it tastes okay? It doesn't
it
taste
doesn't have a
weird or
flavor.
what? Oh, okay.
It doesn't have a
So it's
flavor.
something you can just add to water and drink in your water and you won't even taste it.
No, and I don't think it matters. I mean, as far as I understand, I don't think it matters what time of day you take it
Mm-hmm.
either, or if it's with or without food.
Mm-hmm.
So
Or
it's pretty
should it be taken near workout or it doesn't matter either?
I don't really think that that matters that much. I know that there's a lot of people that talk about, protein right after a workout or before a workout. I personally, I mean, I don't have a ton of knowledge around, I'm not like an exercise buff.
Yeah.
I'm not the person to talk about or speak from an educated standpoint on that. So I don't think it really matters. I think as long
Mhm.
as you're getting it in, that's what's important.
Okay, awesome. We have time for one more question. So I want to kind of recap and, let's talk about kind of like maybe the top three things that we can be doing to support our mitochondria, just to kind of recap from this. So I think one's definitely like the PC oil, right? And then making sure that you're getting that in, kind of just using that as a supplement. And then we talked about daylight. So what's one more kind of non-negotiable, or like managing your light, right? And your circadian rhythm. But what's one more non-negotiable thing that you recommend that people should be doing for their mitochondrial and cellular health?
Oh, Erica, that's so hard for me to answer. I, I teach all of the input, so it's hard for me to prioritize. So I will just say that light trumps everything. So we are completely and totally regulated by light. So circadian biology, you will find dysregulated circadian biology associated with every disease. So that's number one. Making sure that you get your light environment right is a non-negotiable. And I,
Can I
as
ask
you know,
one thing about light here? So, light we know is like so important for our mitochondria and kind of just keeping our body on track. What's your take on all the red light that everyone's using these days? Is that supportive, or is that doing more harm because we're confusing our mitochondria by putting this light into it that it may not be used to?
I know I am a fan of red light therapy.
Okay.
There's very compelling research around the use of red light therapy. Actually, Tina Carew wrote a paper a couple years ago that the title of the paper, if I can remember correctly, was along the lines of, is red light therapy equivalent to pharmaceutical drugs? So she had some really compelling evidence to use red light therapy. Light is medicine, right?
Yeah,
And so I
absolutely.
do want to say that nothing is going to replace sunlight. That is our greatest form of medicine.
I
Is
always joke I'm solar powered. I'm like, I love being in the
yeah,
sun.
solar
It's like you
powered. Yeah,
really are, right?
we
Yeah.
are complicated houseplants for sure. And so we need that sunlight. And so I just feel it's important to make sure that there's no confusion around replacing red light therapy with sun exposure.
Yeah.
And I also think that it's a really great tool for individuals that aren't in a location where they can get as much sun as they actually need, so that we can supplement with some of those wavelengths of light that
Yeah.
we're so deficient in. So, Erica, on our mitochondria, we have these protein complexes, right? When we are making energy, speaking of the phospholipids, so critical for supporting the mitochondrial membrane. But in that mitochondrial membrane, which is rich in phosphatidylethanolamine, and then there's another lipid bilayer that sits on top of that called the cardiolipin. That houses complex 1, complex 3, and complex 4. So we have 4 protein complexes, and then ATPase is complex 5. And we do have chromophores on these protein complexes that absorb light frequencies. So by absorbing near and red light, near infrared and red light, we can actually improve the efficiency of the electron tunneling. So the efficiency of these electrons getting passed from protein complex to protein complex. So more efficiently able to make ATP. Water, the infrared light helps to expand exclusion zone water in the cell. So really, really beneficial for cellular health. And it's targeting the mitochondria, which is why when you read about the benefits of red light therapy, you see that it reduces inflammation, it improves wrinkles, it helps to support energy production. It's all targeting the mitochondria ultimately. So I am a big fan. Not all red light therapy is created equal. And there are a lot of products out there that I would not recommend. So I would just say you want to really, really make sure that you're getting your red light therapy from a company that knows what they're doing, and they're not lying about like flicker and electromagnetic frequencies. The flicker is a big deal because that's really very hard on the central nervous system. So there's caveats to it. I do have, a red light therapy company that I use and recommend that I think is really great. And so I do think that there are really good ones out there. I just would be careful where you purchase, and then also just knowing that it doesn't replace your need for sunlight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay,
Yeah.
amazing.
So to get back to the input,
Yes, the last.
therapy supporting your cells with phospholipids and essential fatty acids. And I would really say like mitigating EMFs. I think that is the biggest insult to our
Yeah.
cells.
I've looked into doing that. We have kind of like an EMF device in the house that's supposed to help mitigate them a little bit, but I'm like, I can manage my Wi-Fi, but I live in the middle of Hollywood. It's like everyone around me has Wi-Fi too. So even if I try to manage it in my home, am I still being bombarded by everything around me? Is it even worth, you know, exploring that or trying to mitigate that when you're just surrounded by it in an urban environment? What do you recommend for people like that?
Erica, this is a hard question for me to answer because I intuitively don't feel, and I mean, even just based on the history of the human species, I don't think we were designed to live in population dense cities like we're living in now. And I think that nature bites back when you have millions of people, in a really small vicinity. I personally don't believe that the harmonizers do anything. They aside from the placebo effect, which I don't want to diminish. I think that if somebody really does believe that these devices are supporting them, then that's huge. But when it comes to actually mitigating EMFs, I always go back to Newton's inverse square law. We want to get away from the source.
Yeah.
So the farther we are away from the source, those frequencies decline dramatically away from them. So we can do a lot in our home to support moving away from the source, making sure that our Wi-Fi is, I mentioned to you earlier, I don't typically use Wi-Fi unless I'm working outside and I want to be sitting in the grass. So we keep Wi-Fi off. Everything is hardwired. At night, all the breakers go off. Of course, the Wi-Fi is off. So there's no electricity going through the circuits in the home. There's no smart devices in the home. I don't wear any wearables. I use Bluetooth, as much as possible. So it's really about making these small little changes that still allow us to use technology, in a safe way. And that is, something that I think is important to get across because it's not about being against technology, it's about understanding that these devices are toxins. And as much as nobody wants to admit to that, they are probably the most volatile toxin that the human species has ever been exposed to. And they, not to get into all the nuances of testing and safety, they're not safe. And anybody that thinks that they are, in my opinion, doesn't understand cell, doesn't understand the mitochondria, doesn't understand the human body is an electric body. And so I do really think that protecting yourself from these frequencies is imperative. And there are some people that, living where you live, they wouldn't be able to thrive there. They would need to remove themselves from a situation where they're living with all these 5G towers and neighbors that have 10 or 15 different devices. And, the environment is just inundated with light frequencies. I mentioned before that we are creatures of light. We're regulated by light. These are light frequencies. I think a lot of people forget that. Yeah. They're just invisible. And we are only able to see like 0.5, I believe, % of the electromagnetic spectrum is visible light. And so just because we can't see it doesn't mean
it's not there.
It has an impact on our
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Justine. I think this has been so informative and hopefully going to help people kind of address, themselves on a more cellular level. If people want to find you online or potentially work with you, what's the best way to find you?
So my Instagram handle is at Justine Stanger or Justine Cellular Nutrition. Justine Cellular Nutrition. My website is justinestanger.com, and I offer a practitioner mentorship program. I also work one-on-one with individuals that are really looking to learn how to be their own doctor and to break away from all of the protocols and the supplements and, the fear-mongering that we have in this whole field. I am also affiliated with Body Bio. I do clinical education for Body Bio. So if you are a practitioner and want to register for an account to access Body Bio products, then you will also have access to booking a session with me to learn more about phospholipids and fatty acids and more about their products in general.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And we'll go ahead and link to everything in the show notes as well.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much. You too.